Oh, we talking about it all today. We talking about security guards and officers on school sites and them roughing up kids. And basically, do we need security guards in schools? I think you're going to be interested to see where this debate goes today on the other side. Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. I know we've been gone. It was a holiday week that fell in the middle of the week. I hope people got to feel rested and eat some food and do all kinds of things. But we are back. I'm looking forward to today's topic. But David, before we get there, you or I did not produce this episode. A very special person did. So we're going to put this person in the captain's chair. And they gonna run everything from the topic to the intros. So Miss Jubilee, why don't you take it away?
Gladly. Welcome to South Star Classroom, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you. I'm feeling wonderful. I'm about to check in with my lovely teammates, see how they're doing, but I'm feeling lovely because I just came back from Jamaica not too long ago. I don't know if you see the glow, the nice like vitamin D, rum punch, Jamaican food glow, but it's right here, right? Yes. I'm feeling lovely, glad to be here. David, how's it going with you? Because I feel like you've got a glow too going on over there.
Yeah, you have a glow. It's definitely evident.
Can you see it? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Charles wasn't gonna say that. He wasn't gonna acknowledge the glow. But thank you, yeah. Dave.
I get that. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Doing good. We're like kind of in the middle of summer over here. And we've had a lot of family come into town. So it's been nice to reconnect with people from, coming different parts of the country. So we've spent a lot of time with family, socializing, and obviously, and now work is like starting to pick up like crazy. As schools or people are kind of, they're in summer, but the planning work for next school year is definitely kicking into high gears. So several of my clients are, they're calling nonstop, and we've got lots of things happening. So the work cycle is picking up for sure. It's warm outside. Getting my good sun exposure, wearing sunscreen, obviously. Spending a lot of time outside, doing a lot of bike riding, been to the beach a couple times. Yeah, been spending a lot of time outside. So it feels good. I mean, I think that whatever the vitamin is that you get from the sun, they say it's good. It's an ailment for many things. And I fully believe in it, because if I get exposed to like too much cloudiness and cold weather, it just like, it kills my soul. But with the sun, it does something else to me. So yeah, that's what's happening, and looking forward to today's conversation. Glad to be back.
Awesome. That's the same thing with Clark Kent, brother. When Superman needs the sun, big. So didn't know you were Superman, but hey, bro, I thought it was a white dude, man. I didn't know it was.
It's not. No, it's
brother.
Yeah.
The Doc, what's going on with you? How are you feeling today? What's going on in your world?
I feel fine. I mean, it wasn't really much of a break for me. I usually try to catch up on some stuff, but I'm back on the road tomorrow. I'll be in Tampa, then I'll be in Atlanta. So I won't even be able to go home. That means I might have to check luggage, which I don't enjoy doing personally, but such is life. If that's the worst thing I got to complain about it, I'm blessed. I have, I don't know if you all know this. I think David may. I used to play ball. I used to play basketball pretty seriously, and then I ripped my knee up to shreds. Like, it was just like this is where all this extra weight has come from. Like, I couldn't work out the way I used to. But I've started to get back in there and got up some games this week. There was a little bit of footage. I have to with my doctor and I, we tape it because we want to see how my leg is healing and if I'm over protecting it or whatever the case is. But I put a few of the clips up. It felt good to be back on the basketball court. I played decent. I went 50%. I played decent, but my whole body hurts. I didn't know a fingernail could hurt. So it is I didn't know braids could hurt. I didn't know earrings could hurt. It all hurts, but it's a good hurt. It's the best kind of hurt. And then yeah, man, I'm blessed and excited to go back on the road. I'll be presenting on 2 different things. One will be the Agentic Black Parent book will be in Tampa, and then the HBCU report will be in Atlanta, which, by the way, just became all the more relevant due to the Supreme Court case. So, you know, I'm excited for those things.
Well,
Did I stretch well enough so O could get on? I wanted to.
You did good, because look who we have here.
Yeah. Before we go to Omar, I can vouch for the clip. I've seen the clips. They are definitely on the internet. They are out there of Charles hooping it up, and yeah, you're moving good on the court, brother. So
I appreciate it, man. I'll
good
be
to see you back out there.
Weeks, so yeah, I appreciate it, man. Them, and it's the thing. The young boys got better athletics, man, but they did not know basketball, so they kind of made it easy on me. It just cut, and you'll be okay. But everybody think they Steph Curry, so let them shoot 1 for 40 from the 3 and make a layup, and you'll win. So thank you, Dave.
Yeah, you got it.
Doc, I'm sorry that you're not doing well. I did not mean to make light of the situation by screaming, "What you gonna do about my legs, Charlie Murphy," while I was off camera.
I feel good. Listen, I didn't go out there and embarrass myself. I didn't stretch nothing. I'm just in pain. That's all. I'm in good soreness pain. So I'm good.
I'm glad to hear it, man. You need to get back out there. I'm really happy to see everybody. Happy 4th of July for those that celebrated. I happen to have been in Canada with bald eagles. So part of me was with a country who still has an allegiance to the very reason that we had July 4th to begin with. So it's odd. Like, Canada is an independent country, but they still have like allegiance to the Queen and King. Weird. Don't know. They have tea time. They're very proper. But it was with a bunch of bald eagles. So they were like screeching over and they were like, "America." And they told me, "America, F yeah." They were coming to save the day. In addition to that, I want to let everybody know that Texas has a phenomenal heat wave right now. So shout out to David, who's probably complaining about 79, 80 degree weather. Julie gets real hot in the DC area, real hot. So I'm sure you're dealing with all that. Charles, you in Chicago right now?
I am. It's been about 80s and 90s, but we just got a big storm today. So flash flood warning. And to your point, Omar, don't lose your space. There was a flash flood warning, but I used to get those in California, right? So I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna run to Best Buy and knock this out. When I say that it was a real flash flood and like cars were stalling and like cars were like stalling out. One car got picked up and I turned around and had to find a new route back. So I will not play with flash flood warnings in the Midwest ever again.
Carried out like DoorDash?
Brother, it was.
Damn.
If you were not in a truck, if you were not in a 4-wheel drive truck that's up, it was not a good look, man. Water, I got in pretty deep. My dashboard like flickered, and I instantly just backed up and found another route. And yeah, so it was interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
I will never play with the flash flood again in my life.
No, man, that is no joke.
To live and to learn. Lovely.
It's nuts. It's nuts, man. You're sitting here getting your car taken out like Jack in the Box carry out. That's some messed up stuff. Yeah, Texas is doing real well. El Paso is in a heat wave. We've broken the record. We've had 25 consecutive days over 100 degrees. Yeah, this is like, it's not usually this hot in Texas in June and July. Like July, August, there's a couple days over 100, but 25 days over 100 it's a new record. And that's no good. In addition to that, the good news is that just like my man Charles, who got injured, I was out messing around on a boat during a friend's party in Portland during the break. And we were doing like what is it called? The wakeboarding and the surfing. I tried the surfing, did not go well, wound up nailing myself against the like back part of the boat right here and in my ribs. And I'm pretty sure I have bruised ribs because it hurts when I cough. So, so the good news is that Dr. Cole will have to recuperate like Superman. David apparently is Superman because he needs the sun. My ass is going to retreat back in the darkness like the Dark Knight. And the good news is we got Jubilee heading up everything. She's the head of the Justice League. So we got her ensuring that us three old dudes who are not even old aren't out of commission because of
three old dudes and the young lady. So, and the young lady who is leading us today. So,
that's right.
Go ahead,
right.
Julie.
I'm excited.
Let's get into it.
I can't wait.
Yeah, so we're talking about really reforming school discipline. We're talking about we're talking about a bunch of things. So I'll share with you the questions that I want us to kind of discuss as we go through this conversation, right? School safety, like you heard the doc say on the cold intro. Does the presence of school safety or resource officers in schools support student safety? Or is it more like supporting the school to prison pipeline, right? And I'm about to share some facts with you to kind of get your brain juices flowing. And then also, like, what are some things that we could do to reduce inequities as it relates to school discipline? So I want to share with you some facts. So as of about 3-4 years ago, there were 700 or more children in United States elementary schools that were arrested on school grounds, right? Black children and children with disabilities were disproportionately impacted by this, right? That's one, right? And then I have information from the school survey on crime and safety, right? As of 2020, the 2023 has not yet been released, right? So they gave principals a survey and they asked principals, hey, how often do certain disciplinary problems happen in your school every single week? And so I'm going to share with you what some of these are, okay? So we've got every single week, right? You've got the following problems reported, right? Student racial ethnic tensions, student bullying, cyberbullying, student sexual harassment of other students, student harassment of other students based on sexual orientation or gender identity, student verbal abuse of teachers, widespread disorder in classroom, and then lastly, student acts of disrespect for teachers other than verbal abuse, right? And so student acts of disrespect for teachers other than verbal abuse was reported at least 15 times within a week, right? Student racial/ethnic tensions was reported about 2.8 times a week, according to the survey, whereas the teacher disrespect other than verbal abuse, 15.3 times a week that's reported, right? And so a couple of things came up in the news in the past few months. One was connected to the first that I gave you, which is children in handcuffs being arrested on site. Right? The other, which happened in April, was a teacher who ended up getting into a fist fight with a student in the classroom, right? And so I'll frame it quickly, then I'll put the question out there. So teacher's a substitute teacher, they're in the classroom. The substitute teacher confiscates the student's phone for whatever reason. The student is angered by it and confronts the teacher goes to the teacher's desk, gets into a verbal altercation with the teacher, wants the phone back, and the teacher ends up trying to get the student out of her personal space, and they end up in a fist fight. The teacher and the student ends up on the floor tussling. The student removed kind of the front part of the teacher's braids, like that's how hard she was pulling. It gets no school safety shows up at all. The video gets posted by a student on social media. Both the student and the teacher are charged with assault.
Wow.
Right? And that's like still pending, right? So we've got babies in handcuffs, right? Over 700 of them, elementary school, right? We've got the example of now, and that's like a bunch of school safety. And we've got the example of no school safety with this issue that happened in the classroom between the substitute teacher and this, I believe, middle school or high school student, right? And then the last example is an example where, again, no school safety, where a teacher pits two students against each other and stands back and watches them fight because of widespread sort of mayhem in the classroom. So there's a video of the teacher standing against the desk, and she just lets the two students on more than one occasion have a physical altercation in the classroom, right? So my question to you is, what do you believe is the role, right, of school safety, right, broadly? Like, let's start there. What's the role of school safety in a school building? To you. I want to start there.
General audience.
General.
We should ask the general audience as well what their thoughts are. Now, I'm real pronounced on this, so I'll kind of take a step back because I got a lot to say. If someone wants to step in front of me, by all means.
Well, I can get out the way and let the school leaders take it after me. I would just say, I mean, common sense ain't so common, but I do think it needs to be applied here. I think the role of school safety is to keep people in the school safe. I think that includes students, and I think that includes adults. I think that there is always kind of this we usually have these extreme beliefs about stuff, and I think it's more nuanced, right? So I remember working in Oakland, and there was like a movement to get all SROs, student resource officers, school resource officers out of the school. And that sounded good, and it played well on TV and things like that. But working in the superintendent's office, we had a bunch of parents of those same very young people in those organizations that's like, I swear to God, if you get these, if it ain't no security guards at this school in Deep East Oakland, my kid will not be there. I'm just letting you know. I think that it's a very nuanced thing. And I also think that handcuffing a kindergartner or first grader or second grader is ludicrous. I don't think that there's ever really a reason to do that. And if you do have a situation where a young person like that has to be restrained, I think that you need to be able to explain that, have evidence for that, and there are humane ways in which you do it. I don't think that there is a just overall one sentence answer though around what should be happening, because I went to schools that were dangerous. I went to schools where, people, I have seen students that were, when I was a kid, that were my age, really just terrorize teachers, like really, where some of these teachers really were scared. I have seen adults be assholes to students and kind of overdo stuff. Like, I've seen it go crazy in a lot of different ways. And if this is the kind of conversation we're gonna have, it's one of them ones where I want to have a real conversation about it. So I'll get out of the way of the school leaders that have been in these situations in different, in different milieu, right? Where like things are happening and they're happening very, very fast. And they're happening fast as a leader, where you have a lot of responsibility, but probably not a lot of information about exactly what happened. So I think hearing it from you all from that perspective might be interesting for our listeners.
Omar, can I jump in?
Please. All
right. So I think the answer is it depends. I think school safety and the different measures that schools and tools have look different in elementary setting. They look different in middle. they look different in high school. I mean, I've broken up my fair share of like high school fights, and it's not fun. Let me tell you that. So, but I do think outside of that, you know, when I think of school safety, I always walk back to like school culture, right? It's really about school culture, number one. And number two, it's about supervision before something happens, right? So do your schools have, you know, I mean, so many of these fights that we see that are on floating around on social media, you're like, where are the adults, right? Like kids in the locker room changing with no adults, kids in the classroom with no adults, in a hallway, like where? So number one, so number two, supervision, right? School culture, supervision, and these are very general and broad. And number three, it's instruction, it's classroom culture. Are students engaged? If students are engaged in learning, and if they orient themselves to school as a place where they go to actually get something positive for them and for their soul and for their being and for their advancement, they're going to be less likely to, you know, go wanting to like cause trouble, right? So I think for me, those are the three big pillars before you even talk about, you know, what to do after the fact or when something is happening. I think violence in schools, you know, I mean, you know, young people are going to like, they're going to fight, right? But I think the phenomena of like, I don't want to go off the tangent on cell phones, but like, you know, some of the stuff goes viral like crazy. So kids have, you know, I think the question of like cell phones in schools play a part, which is a major problem. And then, you know, when adults do need to intervene in a situation, and thanks for the comments, they're rolling in. I love this. Adults need to be trained. So if you are a superintendent, if you're a principal, if you're a head of school, you need to make sure that all of your staff are trained in and around what to do in the event of an emergency. Doesn't mean they have to break it up, but it means they need to know what to do, who to call, who is specifically trained to come in and intervene in these situations. Because you can't rely on somebody who's not trained. People can get hurt. Adults can get hurt. You know, the example that you're bringing forward, Jubilee. So I think those are my quick thoughts before we even want to talk about having police in schools.
Yeah, man, straight up. So I want to acknowledge a few things. First, shout out to Peter and Vita, just outstanding comments, both of you. Peter, I swear to God, I say that all the time. The very best classroom management plan is an effective lesson plan. I say it all the time. When kids are bored, when kids are not challenged appropriately, when you're just handing out like worksheets, yeah, man, like what is the phrase? Like the devil is in the idle hands, or the devil is found in idle hands.
Idle hands or the devil's workshop.
An idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Yes.
You think I would know more?
Old Baptist grandmama here, baby. Continue.
I mean, I knew you all would come to the rescue, and I find it ironic that the things that people say about me, I don't have a grasp of those phrases. So yes, it's very odd, not understanding all the sweet nothings that are spoken about me. So Peter, straight up on that one, and B, you're right about one thing. It's not just about the cultural component, which I agree with completely. Like that's going to be a cornerstone of the book that you all are going to see from us. Hopefully a few months from now, we may have a rough copy. By the way, I've got the outline almost done, people. Been battering away at it, so it's exciting. But culture is such a important part. And what that means is that if you've got a great lesson plan, but you have incredible respect for kids and they know it and they see it, and you've got systems in your school that allow kids voice, autonomy, and respect, you're going to knock out a ton of these issues. So it's now been replaced by MTSS, which Jubilee, you're a bigger expert in this than I can't remember what the heck MTSS stands for anymore, but it replaced RTI, which is called response to intervention. And if you all are listening, there's like a pyramid, right? And it's like the one thing that you do for everybody is going to positively impact 80% of your kids. But then you've got these 15% of kids that need a higher level response, and then 5% of your kids that need a much higher level of response. When we talk about school safety, y'all, so much can be done with just good culture and good lesson plans. But as you jump up into those other areas, I want to echo what Jubilee and David said about Dr. Cole and David said about, you've got to understand the difference between a situation that can be de-escalated by a teacher and a on-campus security guard versus what we're going to get into, which is an actual police officer. And the two are radically different, y'all. Massively different. And I'm all for everyone on the campus being trained. I actually don't have a huge issue with security guards. I would prefer trained social workers, which is what we do at EPLA. So rather than security guards, we have trained individuals within the SPED department and within our social worker department that are trained to de-escalate, trained in how to deal with violent situations. We have dealt with them to the letter of the law and have de-escalated things immensely. It's not to say that this is a panacea for everybody, but I want to create that massive differentiation between mitigating the overwhelming majority of issues with well-trained staff, lesson plans, and culture, and then what's being talked about right now, especially in Texas, where the governor just passed a law mandating armed officers at every single public school. Because I'm going to go on a tirade about that later. But those are my quick thoughts. And Vita, just shout out to you for all your excellent comments. I agree with you immensely in terms of preventing situations through de-escalation. So as I was talking about it, I was shouting you out directly for your comments. So thank you.
Before we move on to the next phase, can I add one quick thing, Jubilee? Because I don't want it to get lost. Sure. Okay, so we're talking about like school culture, school climate, and these things tend to, bubble up into what people call them different things, like an incident, a behavior incident, right? Whether it be violent or not, and some things rise to the level where they need to actually be documented, not documented in the student's record and like a whatever you call it, a referral or whatever, but something happened with Charles today, and we're going to document it, right? So that in addition to like Charles' academic record, we can actually have an internal in-house record that shows, where we can track Charles's, behavior cycles, right? And then we can also look at what it looks like by grade, the time of the year. We can actually, so we created the system when I was at the Urban Montessori, or we were every single like significant behavior incident, we would put into a system. When did it happen? Who was involved? What category was it? Where did it happen? What were the interventions in place? What was the follow-up? What was the parent communication, right? And so over time, we could look at like school-wide data, like you do academic data, or like you should, to then, learn trends, look at subgroups. Is it impacting our Black students, our brown students, our special education, our fourth graders, our second graders? What is it? Where is it happening? So you can like shift resources, right? So similar to what you can do with academics, you can do the same with like school climate data. It's not like a punitive thing. It's just a good resource and a tool for leaders and school teams to have an objective conversation about it, and then to actually do something about it, right? So I wanted to put that out there before we moved on.
Thank you. Yeah, I have some of my own thoughts, because some things that resonate with me, just definitely the comments about training, like all team members need to be trained and all of that. But it also has me thinking about the importance of mindset, right? And awareness of biases, implicit biases, like that whole conversation, and really the importance of one decision. Because at the end of the day, like I became an assistant principal when I was very newly pregnant, right? And so by the time, I was like in it to win it, I had a big old belly, and I was in a primarily Black school in the community that I grew up in, with a big old belly, with a high special needs population, with a large chunk of students that were classified as emotionally disturbed. I have been kicked. I have been spat on. I have had items on my body, like watches broken, tables overturned, and I have had to restrain children when I was 7, 8, 9 months pregnant. right?
Yeah.
In a school building, right? And also tasked with being the adult, being the leader that had to make a decision with, was this a behavioral infraction, as Dave said, or is this a crime?
Mhm.
And so every single day, right, educators are faced with that decision. And depending on how you look at our Black and brown babies, depending on how you look at children, right, depending on the implicit biases you have between, your two ears, that's going to determine the decision that you make. Whether or not that 5-year-old or that 7-year-old who just kicked you in your shin with a Tim boot, you ever been kicked by a Timberland boot? I have. Still have the scar, right? Is going to end up in handcuffs, right, and have to get picked up at the precinct, or if they're going to receive some other school-based, consequence. So, those are my thoughts there. So I agree with the training and all of that. And I think that in order for it to really be effective, it has to be connected to implicit biases. And we have to take a look at the decision making, like the decision makers. And some of the things that my team and I would do is really norming around infractions and language and things of that nature, because we could look at one infraction two different ways, right? And so then maybe my AP might come back to me and be like, suspend them, get them out of here. This is the third fight, or whatever the case may be. And I may be like, well, no, for these reasons. So it's like, but how, if we are the decision makers, how do we norm and how do we get to a place where we're going to look at a scenario and be able to come out with a similar consequence, right? And that kind of brings me to this next place, right, which is really the disparity piece, but I'm skipping. So let's do the question first, and then we'll do the disparities. But that's what I'm really getting at. The disparities come from the decision makers, who have implicit biases, as we all do. So thoughts on what I just shared?
What are we responding to? Are we responding to this question?
Does the presence of, I skipped a little because I was kind of alluding to implicit biases and decision making and inequities. So we can deep. Stop here and then go to that.
Got deep here on the South Star.
It did.
I want to highlight this comment here, because this is really what it all boils down to, right? If you see students as your own children, that should guide how you respond. And so we've talked about it on the show before. When you have schools that serve, or in some cases they don't serve them, they just enroll them from particular communities where there's a disconnect with the adults that work in the building. And so if you have a disconnect, an ethnic, a racial disconnect, a geographic disconnect, even a class disconnect, getting to this point where adults in the building see all children as their own can be very difficult to achieve, even with the best training. But this is actually a brilliant comment. It's a simple comment, but it really is about taking the time to pause when there is an incident, and having an objective conversation, as opposed to vilifying the behavior of a child that may have just not had resources, or had been some communication was misinterpreted. Like, who knows, right? And we're going to jump the gun and say, like, let's get him off campus, right? If that's your child, you're going to want the adults to have a system in place, like what Jubilee said, with the common language, and we're not going to make any quick decisions. We have a process in place before we actually get to that decision point. So thank you, Peter.
Yeah. So let's tackle this. So does the presence of school safety / resource officers in schools support student safety and development, or do they support the school to prison pipeline?
Yeah. Can I jump in on this one?
Go for it.
I got a lot to say, and feel free to jump in. Just before I do, let me just shout out once again, man, the comments are on fire today. Peter, you're absolutely right about one thing. Positive behavior intervention system is something that we advocate for immensely with the South Star. For our listeners, it's just simple. You only penalize kids for things that they are doing wrong. And that's our school system. So you're just punishing kids. And they're like, all right, cool. So you're punishing me. That's the only attention I get. But are you teaching me things that could actually work in the real world? And that's what positive behavior intervention systems do. It is something that we do. Jubilee's seen it firsthand at our schools, and it is positively rewarding students for things like empathy, listening, collaboration. And I mean real collaboration, basically asking a lot of questions, getting everybody in the group involved in something. These things, while aren't sexy in the world of like talking about gun control and violence, have such a positive effect. And I swear to God, take care of so many of the issues on campus. And just to, back up, Vita said, something very similar in terms of like, one, you've got to train everybody on these things. It can't just be teachers, everybody in the organization. And this is the biggest problem. Like, you don't have bus drivers trained. You don't have the custodians like fully trained. And they are so much a part of the organization in the school that if also trained, they could have the most vital conversation with a kid. They're catching a kid usually outside of the classroom system when they're at their most vulnerable. That's the right messenger and the right person to be trained about this. And I want to also shout out Vita really quick, because I'm about to bring something up that's going to back up what she just said with statistical proof. So let me just get into this. Do I think SROs are a positive school support system? Despite the governor of Texas just passing and saying that this is mandatory, I absolutely adamantly believe through science and statistics that they are an extraordinary detriment on our school system. This is not the solution. So check this out. Since 1999, the federal government spent $650 million on SROs, period. 58% of schools in the country have an SRO. That's 58%. So check this out. How's that work out? In 2019, the ACLU did a study, and they found out that 14 million students have an SRO, but don't have a nurse, a counselor, a psychiatrist, or a social worker. So you're going to spend $750 million on an officer. You're hoping that it does well, right? So did they do well? Well, let's jump into it. In 2019, the last time we had stats, in over 179 school shootings over 19 years, there was only 2 incidents where a school officer somewhat helped the situation. And in fact, what happens is that the presence of an SRO, school resource officer, has made things inexplicably worse for a campus. Just to put this into perspective, guys, Uvalde, which has triggered the governor of Texas's decision to put SROs in every single school where the school shooting happened, had an SRO. Parkland had an SRO. 190 school shootings, and there is jack shit evidence to demonstrate that these officers have done a thing in creating any sort of safety on the campus. And in fact, to back up Vita, SROs have arrested 54,000 students. Anyone want to take a guess who the majority of those students were? Black kids. So 31.6% of the arrests on campuses are of Black children, despite the fact that they're usually about 9 or 10% of the school population, depending on where you're at. And they've been arrested, y'all, not expelled, not contained, straight up arrested for shit like throwing a paper airplane or throwing Skittles. By the way, if you're a kid with a disability, any kind of disability, really quickly, 3 times more likely to be arrested.
So thank you for sharing that. That's like powerful stuff. I have a question, right? So you talked about PBIS earlier, right? And now you're talking about these students being arrested for throwing Skittles, airplanes, whatever is across that continuum of infractions. What about the person that's like, they deserved it? Like, let these little kids get what they deserve. Y'all over there doing PBIS, talking to kids about their feelings and empathy, and that's not how the real world works. If you go into Starbucks and you throw something at an employee there, that's assault, they're going to get arrested. All of your little tactics in
Yeah.
school, they don't mirror the real world. Like,
Yeah.
what
I mean,
are you
yes.
going to say? And Doc, I want you to chime in on that too. Like, what about the people that are like, yo, this is what they deserve? Like this little 5-year-old kid is kicking people. If he does that in the real world 10 years from now, he's getting arrested. Show these kids what this world is made of. We're not dealing with it. They deserve that.
I have a little bit of a different take on Omar's piece, and I'll respond to what you're bringing up right now, Jubilee. I actually think there is a role for SROs on I don't know about elementary, but maybe like middle and high school campuses, right? But it's not when I say SROs, I mean properly, professionally trained, supported, and supervised individuals that are held accountable, right? I think I've seen SROs that, we've all seen it where they've escalated situations like crazy, right? I've also worked on campuses where we didn't have access to SROs, and when like shit got heavy, we had to call the police, who are not trained to work in schools, but that's like that's what you're dealt with. So I feel like the SROs can actually serve as kind of like this middle ground, only in and around situations where things get violent, right? And I've worked in schools where we've had incredible violence in the school. I've worked in schools where we might have a fight, and then that afternoon we have a gunfight in the front of school because the families show up, right? And it's like a legitimately like very dangerous situation on MacArthur Boulevard in East Oakland, right? And your counselor or your culture keeper, they're not going to do anything for that situation, right? At that point, you need law enforcement because there are people that are like shooting guns. I also think that well-trained SROs that are from that at least in Oakland, they tend to be from the community, can actually serve as a bridge for young people. When I was at Oakland Unity High School, we had a partnership, and many of our students attended and participated in, I forget what they call it, like a youth. It was like a youth kind of academy for young people to get exposure to law enforcement through the Oakland Police Department. And it was a good way for young people to kind of learn a bit about law enforcement, right? If we want local teachers in our schools, if we want local police in our communities, that has to happen somewhere. And I feel like the SRO can kind of be a bridge there. But if it's not done well, it can absolutely backfire and make things worse. We've all seen that.
Right. No, I agree, man. I think when you go to that question, right, I was taking some notes and then my pen died, but I need to refill the ink. But does the presence of SROs, in schools support student safety and development, or the school to prison pipeline? Let me just start by saying, one, what age group are we talking about? Because I think that actually really, really matters. Again, how I might feel about what a 5-year-old is doing, like a 5-year-old kicking somebody, and you need to be reprimanded and corrected and adjusted. I don't think a police officer needs to be there. But I have seen some other issues with, 17-year-olds where it's like, hey man, like you can't do that. Like you can't bring a weapon on campus. You can't, have your family coming up here, ready to jump somebody. Like, which again, and people that don't work in schools might be like, that don't ever happen. It happens a lot,
man,
in places like Oakland.
I had like 12th graders that were robbing 9th graders on their way in or on their way out, right? They had like collections of like iPhones and stuff. I'm like, our kids were robbing one another, right? Like, yeah, you're right. It happens, man.
It happens, man. And I think to act like it doesn't is to kind of just be driving a political line. I would say this though, man. I think it can also lead to the school to prison pipeline. Both of these things can be true. I don't think it's binary. I think that you have to assess the situation that you are in. And I think that any good organization, like any good team, like you have protocols and you practice things, because in the heat of the moment, good organizations, good teams are not thinking, they are reacting. There's a system in place. So you might hear, if you're a quarterback for the Hawaii, football team, they throwing, that quarterback has 500, yards a game because that's the system. That is the system
Yeah.
that those folks are in. Now, if you in a jacked up system and your school has not set up these boundaries and there's no protocol for when X, Y, and Z happens, you end up with viral last moments. You end up with people leaking things or with things kind of going out there with no context. So I think that we have to be professionals and adults for the people that run schools and are in these situations, and you need to have some type of plan in place. I think if you are a parent watching this, you need to ask this school, what is your discipline policy? Because again, there are two different type of students that we're looking at in this, and this is not to label students. A student can be doing something bad and doing something good. That doesn't mean they're a bad person or a good person, right? So
exactly.
I was in Oakland when they were going through like all this conflict resolution stuff and everything, and they didn't want to suspend anybody, so they would force those young people that were disrupting the class to stay in that class. You cannot suspend anybody, but if that's a class of 26 and it's those two that's acting out, 24 kids are just not learning. Like I've been in classes as a student where the class was so out of control with no type of plan that it was detrimental for you to be paying attention and act like you learning. Like if you look like you raise your hand, they throwing something at you and something's about to happen because there's just no kind of discipline there. So I know as a Black person at the same time, we are disproportionately targeted for this stuff. I was a Black boy in that system. I wrote a dissertation on it, right? Like it comes up around this trauma tax that's there and how our stuff is policed. But it's not a simple answer, I think, of A or B. I think it's a combination of those things, and you need to constantly be checking those practices, improving those practices. You will make mistakes. We will get certain things wrong, but that is how you get on the path towards right, and you don't try to play to any crowd. You don't try to play to any political faction, because if you really care about those kids and the safety of those adults that's on that campus, then you will have policies and do the things that need to be done so everybody there can be safe.
And what they did in California, and I forget how many years ago, Charles, you can help me to remember when this happened. Statewide, they changed California Ed Code, and it was like a Democrat progressive kind of a push to remove the ability of schools and teachers and administrators to suspend children for what's called willful defiance. Right. Which, I think I actually agree with that, but I don't think you do that before you actually provide the training for what to do. They just did it because it was a political move, because Black and brown children were on the higher ends of that, according to the data. But I'm like, it didn't change anything in the classroom. Those kids were just still in the classroom, right? And I'm like, that's malpractice, right? That's straight up unethical.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And
welcome to California.
I want to throw it back real quick. I want to throw it back to Jude, but Vita asked a question. I wanted to just answer it in 30 seconds. She said, you talk to students about empathy and their feelings to prevent them from using violence or escalating situations to where they can become violent. Why would anyone be against that? And the answer that I would give you, and I'm not against it. I think that I'm from Oakland, so restorative justice is like the home of restorative justice, right? But parents started to turn against it in many instances because they felt that kids and people were gaming the system, meaning they had this large infraction, a big fight, somebody got hurt, and then you do the circle and you do the things and you play that role, and then nothing really changed and there was no punishment, and then it did escalate or spill out. Like, so every policy, there are going to be unintended consequences. And I don't think anybody was against empathetic students or students talking about their feelings. I think where a lot of parents in Oakland that I saw and that I got at the district was that they felt that certain folks were gaming that system, and it wasn't really serving its purpose appropriately.
But that was in address to what Jubilee had asked about. Do these kids deserve it? Right? Like, they
I didn't
deserve
get that question. My bad.
Like what we say in reaction, like all that. No, it's a really good point that you brought up, but I want to bring up the context in which Vita was bringing that up in conjunction to what Jubilee said. And Jubilee, I want to bounce it right back to you really quickly, but let me just address this one. To those that say this is what they deserve, like there's no neurological science that backs up your statement. Children don't know cause and effect until 7th or 8th grade. Like neurologically, like your brain hasn't developed to truly understand cause and effect until 7th or 8th grade. And you're like, I knew it. I knew that. I knew better than that as a kid. And I'm like, not really. Your brain was adjusted to a reward and punishment system. You act up, mama slapped you. So this had nothing to do with the effects that you're causing other people. It's, I didn't do this because mama's going to slap me on the back of the head with a chancla. Or if I do this, PBIS, I'm going to garner an award. But kids don't develop that neurological knowledge until 7th or 8th grade. So what do I say to those people who all hard ass? Like, dude, I would love to see you in that situation where you had a temper tantrum in 5th grade, you weren't supported by your parents, and someone came and arrested your ass. And where would you be now? Like, if you were treated the way that these Black kids are treated today, would you be where you're at right now?
Right.
Because I guarantee that you would not. And straight up, like, I'm with you on this one. I understand that there's an age differentiation. But look, when you talk about someone trained that knows the community, that's from the community, and maybe they're an SRO, I am much more of an advocate of someone who is working security at a school, knows the school, is coming at this significantly from a like counseling point of view. But if shit goes really awry, they are well trained to deal with like those high level escalations. Yeah. Because guys, what's going to happen in most schools across the country, even where like really, really bad shit is popping off, Watts, Denver, Oakland, where you desperately need someone who is trained to deal with these high level things. If you've got some SRO in that school, what you're going to guarantee happens is that maybe you deal with like a huge fight happening in the parking lot, but they're going to come in hard and they're going to start arresting all your kids. And it's just going to, the science and the stats are all behind it. So I'm all for having someone privately working for the school who is exceptionally trained, who's coming at this from a counseling perspective versus some hard ass officer that's just looking to like use their gun or arrest kids. The stats aren't behind it, guys. They really aren't. It's
look,
bad. And I'm going to share those stats with everybody.
I am so vehemently against like certain things with elementary kids. I just am. I completely am. And just around what Vita said around, you know, she said it's not the same thing that's after the incident. What I was saying was that some parents had lost faith in the entire practice after so much stuff had happened that when you come to them talking about that stuff and they kid, put it like this: if you are the parent of the kid that got his ass beat 3 different times, and then it's like, and this is what we're doing, like they just weren't open to hearing that, right? And I think again,
what did it feel like? What did it feel like to get your face kicked in for the 3rd time, Charles?
Right. And again, and I get what Vita's saying. I don't disagree with what she's saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, and I'm also saying this too, is I started my career as a social worker. I started my career working with children on the spectrum, and because I was a male, I was able to work with those that had behavior. So de-escalation, having to restrain, having to be able to see things beforehand. And as a social worker, we partnered with a school that I spent a lot of time at. It's called Spectrum Schools. I think they are private schools for kids that have many types of behaviors, and it goes down there, right? So I've been in these heated environments, and there are some people that are good, and there are many people in that building that don't know what they're doing, right? Like, so this question is a much larger question that there isn't a blanket answer, because environments are different, people are different, the people signing up to be SROs are different in different circumstances. Because I do know in some of the worst schools, there are some people like that coach or that man off of that corner or somebody's mama that's been in there, and they didn't have no issues with none of those kids that some of these other people had, right? Like, this is the work, if you are leading a school or a system, that you have to be critical of and ask those questions, and you got to stand in the fire. Like, that is part of your role as a principal or as a superintendent or whatever, because it will not be clean and it will not always go your way. And even with all the practice, some mistakes are still going to happen, and somebody gotta fall on somebody. So Jube, you asked really good questions, so we done ran up through the whole show on the question, you know. Yep. So
it's okay. Like, it's thought provoking, and I'm over here going down memory lane and thinking about the many times that we've had to call the police, just like Dave was saying earlier. And I remember one time specifically that my principal, she made them sit down. Well, she asked them politely. You know, they came in there with their bulletproof vests and their guns, and we had to call for, I believe it was a kindergarten or first grader, but it was wild crazy. I mean, like locking us out the office, throwing things, creating weapons out of like sharpeners. Like it was crazy. And so we didn't have the capacity to restrain, you know, that student. Me being pregnant, my principal was sickly, and we just didn't have the capacity. So we had to make the call for additional support. And when they got in there, my principal pulled out a book and she was like, now sit down. There's a book called The Love Me Bird, and I want y'all to listen to this book. You're in an elementary school, and I need you to have a soft heart. I need you to understand where you are. Like, I know you probably just came from a call trying to arrest somebody who just did a robbery, but we got to soften your heart, you know what I'm saying? So that you understand who you're dealing with in this space. And to your point, Charles, I feel like that. I love you too. To your point, Charles.
He about to ask you for some money in a second. Go ahead.
That's my baby. No.
He about to ask for some money. He want to go somewhere. Tell us next week where he wanted to go.
Play some ball.
Go ahead.
I'm over here trying to do sign language and stuff, but whatever. What's that? But well, I forgot what I was saying. Anyway, that the leaders, right, and the school officials do have to be in this murky place, do need to stand in discomfort, and do need to serve as the buffer in these scenarios, so that people don't come into school all willy-nilly, putting handcuffs on and taking control. It's like, no, the school leader is the one, right? The teachers are the ones that should know what's best for the students, and they are trained to work with students and hopefully have a heart to work with students, so that they're not just getting these very harsh consequences of things meted out to them because no one's standing in the gap for them. So that's what I thought. All right, well, I'm not going to bother going to that other question because we got 4 minutes left. That means that we are ready for final thoughts. So because, or in the spirit of us giving strategies and being helpful to our viewers, what is one strategy, idea, suggestion you would make for parents, for school leaders, whatever audience you want to hit as it relates to reforming school discipline based on our convo today?
Ooh.
One thing.
I guess, one thing. Big picture based on what we've talked about today, and definitely appreciate the comments. Peter and Vita, you're on fire today. Shout out also, Peter brought up Dr. Joseph Marshall, one of my favorites. So we got that. Good thought-provoking comments. Vita talked about this earlier. I think it's not a particular strategy, but it's a mindset that like what we're talking about, or like we're talking about like something happened, and then what is the aftermath? What is the documentation? What is the consequence? But I think, that should be like 10% of the conversation. 90% of the conversation should be on the front end in terms of what types of systems that schools have in place to ensure that, the classrooms are kind of the teachers are the holders of culture, the holders of safety in the school. You're always going to have things that happen in school, even in schools with the best systems, with the best staff. But I would hope that people, as they're coming back to school this year, in addition to talking about curriculum and instruction, which is incredibly important, talk about systems for ensuring a safe school climate, talking about, if something happens, what does that decision-making process look like? When do you call the parent? You call them ASAP to ask them, for their feedback and to bring them in the loop. So your kid is not like, has received a suspension or is in the back of a police car being escorted off of the campus, and then you call the parent because you have no idea what that feels like. That is incredibly traumatizing for everybody. And I think lastly, just, listen to young people. Even, I have so many stories. We're out of time, but I have some incredible stories of talking to 4 and 5 year old kids that, had an escalation issue, and then they de-escalate, and you're like, well, what was going on with you? And some of the things they have to say are just incredible, right? Had a moment, maybe you need to go out and, take a body break or whatever it is. Older kids, it's obviously different, what's happening at home, et cetera, et cetera. But like, listen to the kids, you know, don't rush to judgment. You know, obviously if something is escalates that level of like physical safety, you have to do what you have to do, you know, but do it with grace, do it with good communication, do it with compassion. And if you do have to suspend a student, make sure that you have a re-entry plan for them when they come back, so that they come back into a space that, you know, where they're able to reflect on their behavior, but they also know that they're coming back into a space that they are welcome to, right? And so you said one, sorry, I gave you more.
That's all right. Who's next?
Well, you're supposed to be calling on who's next. Come on, host. You
I
gotta
mean,
steer.
you know, I like to provide choice as well. That's like one of my educator things.
We gotta ride. We try to run a tight show.
Cold call.
All right,
You got a cold call.
Omar, you've got it. Look, now Charles
Yeah,
is
man,
gonna
I'm
close
singing
the
here.
show. See?
It's fine.
Good, man. I want Doc closing. I want Doc closing everything, man. A couple things. One, I think you've got to look at the big issue here. Like, this ain't just about you like that, man.
And then he disappeared. I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with that. Look, I want him to close everything, close out my box. I did not do that. I promise you I would never do that to Omar. He's been patchy the whole time. It's the heat over there, man. His satellites are on fire. Do you want to give your final thought?
We had to remove him from the educational setting. Go ahead.
He's coming back. You know, his stuff is janky, but you know, and I love that you want to give us a choice, but in TV there's a thing called dead air, so you got to steer. But if you want to go while Omar gets reconnected, and then I can jump in if we can work that out.
Sure. I mean, mine is simple. Build a relationship with children. I mean, build relationships and hold. If we're gonna have SROs or school safety officers, that's what they are in New York. Ensure that they're building relationships too. Everybody who comes into contact with children, regardless of your job, role, position, and the amount of years you've been serving in education, needs to know how to build relationships with children. That is really where all of this starts, right? And I think de-escalations and all these sorts of conversations when infractions are either in progress or about to happen, they work when the child is talking to someone who they have a relationship with, who they trust. And maybe that child will not have a relationship with everyone in the building, but at least every single child in the building should have at least 1 to 2 adults that they trust and know that they could go to if they have an issue. So that would be my offering.
And I would say, and hopefully Omar can come back in. He's having issues that have nothing to do with me. I promise you, I did not get rid of my homie.
Let's go.
Right. I would say, you know, I think I appreciate the advice you all gave, and I think it was more at like the school leader. Mine would be for the community and for those parents, right? Like, listen, when you're any school that your kid is at, whether this their first year or they fourth year, you know, regardless of what age, ask about the discipline policy. Ask about, you know, how things usually are happening and like what would happen. Make sure that they have your phone number and also learn what the non-negotiables are. It don't matter how cool a school is. Most schools, whether it's private, charter, traditional, whatever, like if you bring a gun, it's a wrap. If you bring a weapon, it's a wrap. If you have, you know, paraphernalia of any type of sort on you, it's a wrap. If you get into like in certain schools are on fist fights, right? And how bad those are, it's a wrap, regardless of who's at fault, right? Like some of these places we'll just leave it off, David, until if we don't see him at the bottom, we just won't push it. So it'll keep spinning. But so some of those things, like you need to know that as a parent. If something happens, that's not the time to be learning the rules, right? It is the same way that they said about leaders, the same thing Vita pointed out, the same thing that Jew pointed out and said, right? Like the time to build a plan isn't when you need the plan. The time to talk about how to repair isn't at the infraction always, right? It's like at the beginning. what is our game plan? Are we a team that runs a triangle offense, or do we run four corners? Like, what type of school, what type of team are we? But as a parent, as somebody who cares about people in that school, I would ask those questions, and you will learn a lot by asking those questions. So for instance, if you asking a principal what the discipline policy is and they get huffy and puffy about it, or they can't give you a straight answer, then you just got an answer. And you need to be able to move with some agency and to move wisely. If you are the parent of a black boy or a brown boy or a black girl or a brown girl, because girls get it messed up too, you know what I'm saying, in these places, right? Like, you need to be extra vigilant. That is what the data tells us, you know, and we can talk all the love we want. We can have all the right words we want. We can have PBIS. We can have restorative justice or whatever. It don't, none of that shit matter if your kid come home bleeding. So none of that shit matter if a gang fight breaks out on these schools. And again, I'm talking to somebody who's been there when the shit popped out, you know? And so, you know, those will be my final thoughts, is like, it takes discernment. It is both and. These people that are in these positions can add positivity to a culture, and they can add negativity to it. They can be good advocates that are some of my favorite people when I was coming up in elementary school were some of those SROs. They were just cool people from the neighborhood that would stay and play basketball with us or whatever. And some of them can be leading you down a path of to the, you know, school to prison pipeline, right? This is real life, and things don't fit in a nice box. And so use discernment and go from there. Go ahead, Jube. Thank you for that. And yeah. Oh, actually, you went. Omar's not here. We were trying to stretch for Omar. There's just a spinning thing for Omar. We love you, O. But that was Omar. He was here. I promise you. And push him next time to finish his answer. We'll see if he remembers it. But that was Omar. That's David. That's Jubilee. I am Charles. We will see you all next week. Same bat time. Same bat station. I'm going to try to make sure I can be on the show, but I will be on the road. So we will do the best that we can. But this was an excellent show, Jubilee. Every round of applause, everybody, for Jube. All right, this the last one you get, because you officially not new no more, and we're gonna treat you like the rest of us.
I didn't get my celebration, like with the hat, my welcome party.
Oh my God, I don't know what you've been watching. That don't happen here. We are the SROs in this situation, so that's just, it ain't happening. But you've been listening to the South Star Classroom. Join us again next week. Peace.